evening and welcome to the February 6th, 2023 special meeting of the Eugene City Council. Thank you for joining us in this hybrid meeting format. For work sessions like this one, where there is no opportunity for public comment, those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers listed for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. And thank you all for joining us. And with that, I'll call this special meeting to order. And I'm going to turn it over to the city attorney, I think, to introduce this.
Sure, absolutely. Hi, good evening, Mayor and Councilor. What you have in front of you and what is in your AIS is an attachment A is the resolution that would refer the ordinance for the May 16th ballot, and it would refer the ordinance that was the subject of your November and December public hearings that would add section 6.695 and 6.696 to the Eugene Code, which prohibit fossil fuel infrastructure in new low-rise residential buildings. And for comparison, and if there were questions, attachment B is the ordinance that was the subject of that public hearing. And the substantive provisions with that was starting with section 1 are what match section 1 in the resolution that would be referring it. And then attachment C is just the minutes of those two public hearings, if you're interested in seeing just a high level summary of what was discussed at those public hearings. So there is a motion included in your AIS that would refer this to the May ballot. And that is really all I need to say to set this up. And I will just turn it back over to you. And if you have questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, that's great. I'm assuming we should just turn to Council President to put this on put the motion on the table, and we'll have a second, and then I'll open it up for people to comment.
And just confirming this is
that's the one.
Recent. Okay. All right. Thank you, Mayor. As Council President, I move to adopt a resolution calling a city election on May 16, 2023 for the purpose of referring to the legal electors of the city of Eugene a measure adding section 6.695 and 6.696 to the Eugene Code 1971 to prohibit fossil fuel infrastructure in new low-rise residential buildings as set forth in attachment A.
In my role as Council Vice President.
Thank you. Yes. And Mike, I would expect you to speak to this.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I asked for this work session on this because as the city's attorney mentioned, we had ended up having multiple public hearings because of the public interest on this. We had, well over 100 and some folks give testimony. And when you see the Sunday paper and there's hundreds and thousands of folks who are in that particular case advocating that we don't pass the ordinance. And we've received, I would venture to say, thousands of emails on both sides of that question. And we've seen, we know that, folks have signed hundreds and actually over 4,000 letters now asking us not to do this. I understand the imperative of those who speak in favor of it and want to give, I think this rises to the level of allowing the community to input and have input on this. And I have one question for the city's attorney. I had asked you previously about PUC and building codes and authority about this. If someone files an appeal on what I believe will be the eventual council decision to pass this ordinance anyway, let's say hypothetically this council did that, I think it'll happen 5-3 or 5-4. When that appeal goes in, would it not stand a better chance if the people had voted this ordinance in as opposed to the council doing so? What do you actually, the better question is, what do you think the dynamic of that would be?
A good question. It really depends on, it would probably change the type of action that's brought. If council adopts it, you would bring an action in circuit court, probably challenging our authority to do it or saying you're acting outside your authority. When it's adopted by the voters, there are ways to challenge it. It probably would be directly with the Court of Appeals. It would be different form of action. So the potential of success, I can't speak to, but it would be a different type of.
It would potentially have a harder time being overturned if the people had passed it as opposed to the council, though, yes?
I can't say one way or another, without knowing exactly what the arguments are, what's being challenged. Is it being challenged on constitutional grounds? Is it being challenged on statutory grounds, conflict, all that kind of stuff. So I can't say, I wouldn't feel comfortable rendering a.
I understand. I can't see the clock, so I'm just gonna ram. Oh, there it is. Sorry. So the more important reason for me at the moment is that I don't think anybody doubts in here, the public's gonna vote on this one way or another. Either we're gonna send it to the ballot, or after that much input and all of the letters that have already been and signatures that have already been collected, having this taken to the ballot by interested parties who want to have the people vote doesn't seem like a complicated thing. And I think all of us know it's likely to end up there. The challenge is this. If we don't pass and send it to the voters ourselves at this time, if we did it, it would end up in May. If we don't, then by the time we make a decision, and if it ends up 5-3, 5-4, as I suspect, then by the time that could be voted on by the people, it would be November. And here's the problem. Most building of new homes is done in the summer. We're in a housing crisis. It's my opinion we should be doing everything legally possible to help see more housing get built in our community, to help incentivize it. If we have, I apologize, just a couple more seconds if I can, just to finish. If that question isn't actually decided until November, because it may go to the ballot and we vote in favor of it, hypothetically, at some point in the spring, nobody's going to build any homes this summer in Eugene. Single family homes just won't be built anywhere near the emergency level we have with the housing crisis we're in. And I'm concerned that mixed message is going to be a problem.
I'll give you a second round.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I would like one.
Anybody else wanting to speak?
Want to hear what he has to say?
What?
Want to hear what he has to say?
You want to hear the rest? Okay, if you've got more, the rest of council wants to hear you.
I think that if we could see our way to putting it to the ballot now, there's many people in the community, and I think several at the table, who think it stands a high degree of passing if the public votes on it. In that case, the question is settled. And for me personally, I will say, I wouldn't be in favor of this ordinance. I would probably vote against it. But if the people voted it in, you'd have my wholehearted support to enforce it and do it. And because I believe when the people speak, that's the last word on the subject. So that's how you'd earn my support on doing this. And on a longer term basis, and some of the other steps we're talking about, I'm not sure that people would vote it in favor. And I think for us to say we know better and not allow them to will both be futile, because there'll be enough petition signatures anyway. And I think it sends a bad message from the council to the community. So there's a full list of reasons that I've spoken to before. This was just newer stuff that I wanted to say. And the last piece of that would be, I heard Alan in the last 30 days twice say something to me or to the council, and I heard it in the mayor's state of the city, that climate change action, according to a poll we had done, is the fourth most important issue to the people of Eugene. And so I know I have heard there's concern about this being an off-year primary, and maybe not a lot of people would show up. Well, I think if this question is on the ballot, and as you asserted that this is the fourth most important issue to the people of Eugene, lots of people would come out to vote on this. I don't think that otherwise, I don't think both of those things can be true, that it's that important of an issue and nobody would come out. So I think we'd have, I believe what you said, and I think we'd have a very strong turnout as a result.
Comments? Alan?
Thanks for that, Mike. Thanks, Mayor. I get this is difficult for people. Change is always hard, always has been. The saying that the only thing that is constant is change. I looked it up. It's been around for 2,500 years. It dates back to 5th century Greek philosopher Heraclitus. And so, yeah, it is. This is change. So I get it. But I also lament where we find ourselves here now. It didn't have to be this way. I saw this coming about 3-4 years ago, and I tried to avoid this by a negotiated agreement with Northwest Natural. But that in the end didn't happen. I think this tactic of banning new natural gas hookups was thrust upon us, and it's unnecessarily divisive and puts our community in an unfortunate win-lose circumstance or situation. This is one small action. It's not part of a well thought out strategy on how to proceed, like the CAP 2.0. With logical steps towards decarbonization of where we need to go, we definitely need to stop burning fossil fuels. But how do you get there is the question, right? And what do you do first? It might be different if this action would result in big, huge reductions of greenhouse gas emissions, but it doesn't. Future new residential greenhouse gas hookups represent only 1% of the greenhouse gas emissions we need to reduce to meet our CAP 2.0 reduction goals over the next 20 years, 1%. My original idea was that the climate actions that we would do would first focus on things that make a big difference and things that would bring the community along on this very long path that we need to go towards decarbonization. This wasn't one of them. And we'd start with things that provide incentives for people to change. And yes, we would regulate where we need to and when we have to, but we wouldn't start necessarily there. And we have this very long road ahead of us. And I think it's going to be difficult. There's going to be a lot of difficult decisions, and we need, that we need to make, and that will require public support and goodwill. And I feel as though we've kind of squandered the goodwill and support that we built up through the planning and the public engagement we did in creating the Climate Recovery Ordinance CRO and the CAP 2.0. But here we sit. So what to do now? There's been so much misinformation, misperceptions floating around about all of this, what's happening, what's not happening. I would prefer us to have a strategy that encompasses more than just banning new hookups of natural gas and residential. And to that end, I would like us to put forward a strategy that has the following elements. I would like to link the commencement of the prohibition of new natural gas hookups to the availability of incentives for new.
You're over time. If no one else wants to speak, I'll let you go. If everyone wants to hear the whole thing, I'll just give you a second round. Or is that okay?
I was
Okay.
going to say, I agree
Go
with
for it.
him so
All right.
far.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'm sure you want to hear. Okay, go for it.
Okay. I would like to put forward a strategy with several elements to it. One would be linking the commencement of the prohibition of residential natural gas hookups, new residential natural gas hookups, not existing, to the availability of incentives for new heat pumps and heat pump water heaters from either Eugene, the state, and the feds. More particularly, I'm thinking about the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, IRA, that's sending millions of dollars for these kinds of incentives. That's probably not going to be July 1st. Second, I would limit prohibition of the new commercial hookups to only space heating and water heating and not process emissions. Those are the hardest to decarbonize, right. And maybe decarbonate too. And focus on office, retail, schools, government buildings, hotels, and deal with the rest of commercial greenhouse gas emissions at a later time. That's a vast majority of the emissions. 84% of the natural gas emissions come from space heating and water heating. Just those two things. So that's where we should focus and make that prohibition on commercial counts on those limited group also coincident with the availability of incentives, which is probably not on July 1st, and defer action on industrial sector to a later date. I think that's a very tough nut to crack, and we don't need to do that right now. And then finally, I think we should investigate. There's a lot of discussion about cooktops, gas cooktops. So I'd like to see us investigate a requirement for automatic ventilation to go on when someone turns on a gas stove in new and then phase that in on residential, because there's a lot of them that already exist. So if we had a plan that resembled what I would just described, I could move forward with this.
Okay, Greg in the queue. Take it away, Greg.
Yeah, I want to support what Alan has just said. I think that we're going to get more flies with honey than other substances. And one of the things that I've been very bullish on is the issue of incentivization for people to make changes over to renewables and to other forms of power that are out there and on the horizon that can be done in a way that does not necessarily pit us into two different camps on the issue. I'm really strongly in favor of moving this to the ballot in May and referring it to the ballot in May. And in that way, the community can have their final say so on what they want to see done around this, and can give us the kind of direction that I think that we seek from a majority of our constituents out there. I really believe that maybe we pulled the plug a little bit too early on some of the negotiations with Northwest Natural. I understand that they were fraught with all kinds of difficult challenges and that our staff did the best they could to negotiate with them. But I think that Alan has the right idea, and that is that we need to incentivize change instead of making change a result of punitive measures on an area that we really need to be focused on, and that's building new units and getting more people into housing sooner than later.
Okay, Brandy.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank the colleagues that spoke before me. I think Councilor Clark did an excellent job of kind of framing up the issue. I think Councilor Zelenka gave us what seems to me a very reasonable path forward, and one that I could wholeheartedly support. I'm all for finding ways to bring people on board and move with us rather than blunt force policy that just creates the win-lose scenario that I don't think helps our community when we have a lot of hard work left ahead of us on a variety of issues. And then I liked how Councilor Evans framed up how we go forward with the incentives and helping people get to a point where we can move in a reasonable direction, but where it's not being forced on people. It's not 8 people in the community. Granted, we're all elected officials, but raising edicts of where we're going to go with this. This gives people an opportunity to reasonably opt in and get there. I'm in the process of putting a heat pump in my house, and it is extremely expensive. And to be able to have incentives that help that occur is going to make that so more people will be able and willing to move forward with that. So I support this motion for a variety of issues. But I also agree with Councilor Clark. We're either going to vote in May or we're going to vote in November. If we vote in May, we get to put forward exactly the wording of the ballot measure. If it's put forth in November, we relinquish our input on that. Thank you.
Okay, Jennifer.
Yeah, thank you. So for me, there's really 2 separate issues, and I know we've talked about it before and other times that we've talked about sending things to the ballot. So this is probably not new information for counselors who've heard me say this before, but I don't think it sends a message of we know best. I think it sends a message of we are doing the job that we have been elected to do. So for me, it's not about the whatever particular issue that happens to be on the table at the time. It's about the process that we're supposed to use to do our job. And there are mechanisms for the community when we get it wrong, and they need to step up and either elect a new representative or use the systems to get their own ideas on the ballot that were created for just this reason. So I will be voting no, because I just think that's the job I've been asked to do, is make these tough decisions. I'm really excited to hear that there's a lot of support for incentivization. I think that that will be an integral part as we start to transition folks who clearly can't afford to do it on their own. I know my nonprofit has a natural gas furnace and boiler, and I would not be able to change those today if I was asked to. So incentivization is going to be a huge part as we move forward and do this, what will probably be a several decade long transition away from fossil fuels in our community. But the ordinance that we're talking about today is not about that. It's about new buildings that are an opportunity for us to make a better choice in our community and stop increasing a problem we've already identified. You know, it's not just a climate issue, although it is a big part of why I support this this ordinance, but it's also a health issue. I mean, the American Medical Association has spoken out about this. This is not a new issue. This is something that major organizations are coming up and saying, hey, we really need to pay attention to this. It is not safe in our homes. And for many people, especially in my ward where it's a little over the city average of renters, you take all those renters, which is 53% in my area, you add all the children who don't have a choice about how their homes, their food is being cooked and the quality of their air. Like, the majority of people in our town do not have a choice. Choice is an illusion. The choice is being made for them. So I just feel like this is the right time. We need to start making steps. And then we're going to start on many of the things that Alan is talking about, because this can't be the last step. It's the first step.
Thank you. Any other counselors wanting to speak to this? Hang on, Emily. Okay.
I know this is a really hard thing, and there's two parts of our job: to represent and to lead. If we were just representing, we could make a computer program and everybody could push the button they liked. We've been working on this a really long time, and the opposition is fairly recent. New construction, if we put in electricity and don't have to put electricity and gas into the house, would be cheaper. The appliances are much more efficient. The best thing we can do for our energy use is to need less of it. So efficient appliances will help us with that. People are concerned about increased costs, but if your appliances use less energy, that may not be such a problem. Got to look at the health issues. Came to my house last week with the fancy camera that shows the emissions, and I'm ready for a new stove. My gas stove, and I'm a chef, I like gas, has some problems, and I have a huge collection of pots and pans I really like, and I haven't cooked on induction yet, but I saw the pictures of what was coming out of my stove without turning it on, and I saw what happened when we turned on the oven. And I'm a pastry chef. I want to use an oven, and it was astounding. I'd rather have an electric oven. They're more same temperature throughout. But I'm willing now to start pricing pots and pans. I think that this is a serious issue for our health. And I know it's hard, and I know people are scared. It is only new construction. We haven't gotten to incentivizing more electrification. I think it's important. I think it's also important to honor past decisions that council has made, like the CRO, and we're really far behind. And yeah, this isn't as big a deal as transportation, but a third of our emissions are from buildings. I think this is an important first step, and I think we need to honor the people that have worked so hard for this. I'm concerned that if it goes to a vote, there will be a huge, huge amount of money from the gas company, and it will be difficult to have a fair conversation. The large double truck ads of names, I counted, I read them, I knew 4 people. There was about 1,000 names, which according to Alexa is 1.1% of the population, including babies. I don't think it's enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Matt?
Thanks, Mayor. When a Great Dane barks, the whole neighborhood listens. And every time we turn on our gas range, because as renters, we have no choice. By contract, we were forced to get an account with eWeb and get an account with Northwest Natural. So every time we turn on that gas range, Vegas flips out. Smart dog. Pays attention to the science. So I appreciate the note about the health concerns as well. We've heard more than 10 hours of testimony, or we've had more than 10 hours of work sessions. So we've heard countless folks come and testify concerned about the health piece, in addition to the critical climate piece as well. But we have no choice. More than half of our community who rent have no choice. And unfortunately, this issue is being framed as taking away one's choice. These are homes that do not yet exist. More than 80% of new homes are built with natural gas, fracked gas hookups in our community. In Eugene, more than 80%. I find it baffling that there's so much advocacy and enthusiasm to protect the interests of a fracked gas monopoly. I'm going to be voting no to send this to the ballot in May. And I recognize that there are likely signature gatherers champing at the bit, ready to roll. And we likely will see this come forth in the fall. But it's our job in a representative democracy to do the right thing. And I fundamentally believe this is one of a myriad of steps that are needed from a climate perspective and from a public health perspective to do the right thing. I urge a no vote.
Okay, Lindsay.
Thank you. I think the city has been working for over a decade on engaging the public in conversations around climate and what we can do as a city to meet goals that were set in the CAP 2.0, the Climate Recovery Ordinance. This is one small step. It's a building code change in effect that we can work towards those goals. We've had a decade nearly to be innovative, to work towards those goals without regulatory process. And it's not working. We have to do something to meet our goals, or we're not ever going to meet them. And it is well within the role of the city council to make this change to the code. And for that reason, I will be voting no.
Okay, I think both Mike and Alan asked for a second round, but I'm going to interject as well here. And I am going to encourage my colleagues not to send this to the ballot. I think you were all elected, and many of you campaigned on climate. You were elected because, among other things, you said you were going to work on climate, and you have been working on climate. This is an issue that has progressed actually very slowly. And we are finally at a point to take an action that when you consider, I hear the statistic that Alan is citing, but when you consider that we will be building housing, that we have a governor who has pledged to build 36,000 new houses a year. We do not want those houses with natural gas hookups, and we can lead the way in the city of Eugene to say this is how it's done. We know because our nonprofit providers put in ductless systems and electric stoves. We know they're cost effective. We need to build that, more of that middle housing that can be electric. It meets our climate goals. It meets our housing goals. It's an important step. And I believe that you have all worked on this, and councils before you have worked on this, and a mayor before me has worked on this. And it is time to make this step. And I agree with Alan. I'm looking forward to all of the things coming down the pike at the state level and the federal level that will also further this work. But that is not a reason not to act locally today or now in terms of allowing the council just move forward and do the work that you need to do as opposed to opening this to public. I will also say one other quick thing, which is the only people who are asking to take this to a vote are people who oppose it. The people who want this to happen are happy to have us do this work. So, okay, Mike and then Alan.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Alan that this is the better approach. But I think it would be a huge mistake for us to, at some point in the future, move towards a ban imposed by the council and then talk about incentives. I think that the poll that we had done that's been referred to several times made it very clear that there's a high degree of cynicism about council's decision-making in the community. And I believe that one of the reasons I would like to see the community vote on it in May is to lessen that rather than exacerbate it. If we try to say we know best and we're going to pass something like what's been discussed at some point in the future, and I don't know why we're not voting tonight on that, on the original question of just passing it or not. But if we do that soon, I think you will see a level of community cynicism that will be more toxic than what we have now. And Mayor, due respect, with all of the things that the governor has said and all that they may do, if we put this ban in place for our summer, I fully expect to see many houses built in Springfield and Crestwell and Harrisburg and Junction City, but none in Eugene, because the people who build them, and the 80% that Councilor Keating referred to, do so, build 80% of the homes with gas, is because it's what the market wants to buy. And so if they can't build them here, they'll go and build them somewhere else, because otherwise, why would you risk your money to build something that you have reasonable certainty the market doesn't want to buy? But more importantly, we'll have made the cynicism about council worse if we push forward that way. And it'll just be a greater incentive to those in November. And we'll have a bigger problem with the long term of this conversation, where, as Alan mentioned, and I agree with him, the pace of the conversation previously was reasonable. And I know that Greg has said on many occasions, the incentivization, is that the right word? Incentivization path is the wiser one. I agree. I just heard Alan agree. I heard Randy agree. I agree. I think we have a greater opportunity for council, you know, something closer to unanimous agreement to move forward in that way. And I just, the way we're going about this on both of those fronts, I think we risk further division in our community and lack of ability to move forward with something wise. So I hope we send it to the ballot so that people feel heard. And if you don't, and if your chief concern is they won't make the right decision, I think you really need to re-examine that. Even if they said no, we still have the ability to move forward with incentives and accomplish the end goals even better, in my opinion. So thank you.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah, I actually think builders build houses because they make a profit, not because of the amenities or because they're evangelists for natural gas. So I kind of doubt that as far as what we do, that they won't build any houses in Eugene. There's already land built, and if they can make a profit, they'll move forward, and that's what they do. It's what their job is. I actually, I think we always need to make clear the distinction between what we're talking about is new houses and not the tens of thousands of existing homes that have natural gas. Keep that distinction very clear in our heads. And there was and where we're heading and how we're heading. There was a recent study by the Oregon Global Warming Commission that shows that all of the programs and regulations we already have in place, already adopted, rules in place and regulations, we can meet our greenhouse goals by 2035 and without any further action. So but I still like carrot and stick approaches in government. So what I'm interested in doing is going forward with a prohibition, but when incentives are available, and that while that's divisive, it's only really about the new houses coupled with incentives. So so incentivizing energy efficient heat pumps, energy efficient heat pump water heaters that are electric. And so the incentives for that should be in place by the latter part of this year. So what that means is that it could go into effect then. It's not going to be available July 1. So I'm thinking maybe January 1st, 2024 is so that the two things are in alignment. And the comment I made about investigating a requirement for automatic ventilation to be turned on when people use their gas stove. Been reading some of these studies. The number that stuck out to me was only 20% of people turn their fans on when they use a gas stove. And a lot of that could be handled by proper ventilation or just using stove, not eliminated, but significantly reduced, especially with regard to existing where they don't have a choice. As far as throwing things to the ballot, my general rule is that taxes and monetary issues like that are things that go to the ballot, but not regulations. We regulate all sorts of things all over the place. That's our job. Regulations are what the council is supposed to be doing. And so I'm going to vote no on this, but hope we will follow a strategy similar to the one that I outlined. That's a package. So when we come back with this, I want to see a package of things moving forward, not just one part of it.
Okay, thank you. So if everyone's had a chance, we have a motion on the table. And so all in favor of the motion on the table to send this initiative, to the ballot, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so that goes down. Thank you very much. And Emily, comment?
Now that we've done this, I agree, we need a package. I totally want incentivization and weatherizations. Not quite sure how we're going to pay for them, but I think they're really important. One thing I want to mention to the people who are worried about natural disaster and not being able to use electricity is you won't be using any gas. Those pipelines will not be available for explosions. They'll be turned off. So I think it's time to pass this and not make any more to do about it and get on with the rest of the package and the other things we need to deal with. Therefore, I move to adopt an ordinance prohibiting fossil fuel infrastructure in new low-rise residential buildings and adding sections 6.695 and 6.696 to the Eugene Code 1971 as set forth in Attachment B, but updating the 2022 date in the signature blocks to 2023.
Second.
Okay, do you need to speak more to that?
I think I've been clear.
Anybody want to speak to that? Alan?
Yeah, what I just said was I want to see a package move forward. This is piecemeal. Okay. So I'm not going to support something that's just this one thing. If we can package that together and think about it a little bit more, and I don't like surprise motions, but which is why I didn't make one. But if we could pull all those things together so people have a clear idea of what we're doing instead of just this one narrow thing, which has been so misconstrued and so much misinformation about it, I fear that what we're going to be doing here is actually just making it worse, and especially without a bit more conversation about it. So I'm eager to have a work session on this, but also, and at that work session, I would bring back a motion that had several elements to it, where we would investigate what to do about commercial and what to do about industrial and what to do about incentives. But so right now, this doesn't fit my model about how we should move forward. So what I've said was, I can move forward with a prohibition on new natural gas hookups for residential, as long as there's incentives in place to do that. The incentives are on their way. They're very close. They've been approved by the Congress. They're in the works at the state level for heat pumps and heat pump water heaters. They're all in play. The programs just aren't there and they're not available yet. If we do this before that, that's, I think, problematic for people. So people who want to put in those energy efficient heat pumps should be afforded those incentives. And if we just wait a little bit, they'll be there.
Hey, Craig.
I just want to say I agree with Alan. I think that what we need to do is we need to put together a package of incentives that we constructed around, forgiveness of permit fees. We look at SDC charges, and we look at other incentives for weatherization and insulation and other things that could be part of a more comprehensive package and a more comprehensive ordinance that I think would make sense, and that we could, move to an adoption around the first of next year in January. I think that would make more sense than just isolating one piece of this, and that we bring back a clear package of incentives that would incentivize construction without having fossil fuels and that fossil fuel infrastructure being necessarily involved in that. That we can look at alternatives and that we can look at renewables and not necessarily look at banning infrastructure that may be carrying those renewables or carrying some other form of power that is of zero carbon footprint or close to zero carbon footprint. So I think what we have done, though, is we have gotten off of the whole concept of talking about decarbonization, which is what this conversation should be about, and gotten off on the sidetrack of talking about electrification and banning natural gas, when we need to have a whole array of options in front of us to be able to do and be able to implement strategies that are going to get us to our ultimate goal in 2035 and ultimately by 2050 of having a zero carbon footprint.
Hey, any other counselors with comments? Emily?
I know this is hard. I think it's interesting that we've been talking about it so long, and now it's coming up that we should have it as part of a package. I think this is important for our health and our climate's health, and it's not a decision about what's best for each individual desire, but what's best for our community and our children now and in the future. And I think we should move forward with this. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll get to you in a minute. Jennifer?
I think Lindsay was.
Lindsay? Okay.
Yeah, I just want to touch on we put this code in now. We're building the city that we want to see in the future. It's not taking choice away from each individual, because you can choose to buy a house with gas. If you want to build a house with gas, you still have options to do so in other parts of outside of the city limits. So we're creating this city that can be, following our goals and meeting the decarbonization goals to be less dependent on fossil fuels. And, we've fought wars over fossil fuel. We have a dependence on foreign energy. And I know most of our natural gas comes from Canada and the US, but overall, we should be focused on living and being sustainable here in Oregon on our energy. And we have a unique ability to do that here in Eugene. EWEB being very, 90% of it coming from renewable sources, where other parts of the country do not have that luxury. So I think we can become leaders in this work in unprecedented kind of ways. And we do have to look at what are we putting in our homes. We know that we have gone through many different types of energy. We've gone through coal and kerosene and all sorts of ways to heat and light our homes that we have all agreed are not healthy choices for us. We have seen a lot of evidence now that supports that natural gas is one of those that does not promote a healthful indoor air quality for us and our children. I think there's just enough evidence out there that this is causing harm. And if we move forward with electrification, there is no harm done to the individuals. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Jennifer?
Yeah, thank you. So first, I want to thank Emily for bringing this motion forward. I remember as a young person learning about global warming and waiting for the adults in my community to do something. And what they did was, you should recycle. And here we are. And we're the adults. And we're being asked by many folks in our community, many people whose voices have historically never been listened to. And they're asking us to do something, to take this seriously, to take a step, to show them that we're going to make progress. It's going to be slow and it's going to take us decades, but we have to start moving. And this is that movement. And so I will be supporting your motion.
Okay. Anybody else? I know you want a second round. Hang on.
Thanks, Mayor. I couldn't call up the audio aid in the first debate we had, so I'll bring out a visual aid. This is my inhaler that helps keep me alive. I'm an asthmatic, largely because I suspect the home I grew up in was a natural gas home, natural gas fireplace, natural gas range. So I talked earlier about choice and the more than 50% of renters who have no choice. I'm looking at a whole new generation that have no choice. I welcome a package, but let's look at those incentives in that package when we bring a coalition of the community together for industrial and for commercial. These homes don't exist yet. So let's not build any new homes in our community with fracked gas. I'll be supporting the motion. Thanks, Emily.
And thank you. I know Alan wants another round, but I also want to take a moment to speak to this because this council actually has approved a package. I mean, you approved 5 motions in July, and they involve doing exactly, Alan, what you were asking to do, which is create a roadmap, look at the decarbonization, have a robust community engagement. This council has already approved to move forward on that. This particular motion was parsed out because it was simpler, it was narrower, it was looking at housing that hasn't been built because there was no cost to doing that. It has been blown out of proportion by opposition, but most of that opposition is what's coming in the package that in fact this council has already approved. So that work is coming and it will be a robust, and as Jennifer says, it's a decade or 2 decades worth of work in terms of how that rolls out and how those incentives work and how we're able to take advantage of it. That should not block this action now. All right, and Alan, one more thought.
exactly why we should bring back a comprehensive package, because it has been blown out of proportion and it's been misconstrued. I don't like surprise motions. This wasn't on the agenda. It's bad procedure for us to do that. I think we need to discuss what the proposal is to adopt. So I would ask Emily if you wouldn't do a friendly to, instead of adopting it tonight, to have the city manager bring back motion to adopt as soon as possible in the next couple of weeks.
I don't see the difference. No.
You could make a motion to amend it to do that.
Yeah, I move to amend the motion to have the city manager bring back a motion to adopt as soon as possible. So we can
Second,
have time to discuss it and read it.
second.
Okay, Mike, want to speak to that?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. City Attorney,
Yes.
let's say that Alan's amendment fails and Emily's motion passes. Will you tell me about the timing for the general public to collect adequate signatures to reverse our decision? What's their deadline for the May ballot?
For the May ballot,
Yes,
if they have, I don't think there is a timeline of which they can meet the May ballot. Okay, she's bringing me something.
sorry, I should have asked our city recorder as well. I
Oh.
apologize, Katie.
Okay, so timing wise, you can have, once it's adopted, if it's adopted, if it passes, then they have 30 days. People that wanted to refer it to the voters would submit a prospective petition,
Right?
and that would actually stay implementation of the ordinance with submission of that perspective. And then during the collection of the signatures, the ordinances stayed. And also if they collect enough signatures, it stayed until it's voted on. So they have 30 days because the ordinance will take effect within 30 days. So they have 30 days to collect the signatures. They have 60, it really depends on how quickly the petition.
It's possible to get on the May ballot because we're not gonna hit
Fair-
March 15, right?
Barely, yes, there is.
They start tomorrow, they can get it done, right?
Okay, why don't you speak to it? Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, so it would be within days of getting it in because you could call a special election. She'll speak to it.
So, thanks, council. So, typically we would see it on the next available election under state law and not sooner than 90 days after the certification. However, there is an exception where council may choose to place the referendum on an earlier special election. And the special election may not be held earlier than 66 days after the certification of the petition, which would put us really close to my filing deadline for the county, which is May 16th. I want to say that gives us,
May 16th?
oh, sorry, March 16th. I'm sorry, yeah. May 16th is the election. March 16th is my filing deadline to get it on the ballot.
Okay. And did you just say that it requires the council to send it there?
If you want to do it sooner than 90 days, council may choose to place the referendum on an earlier or later special election. And it cannot be held earlier than 66 days after the certification of the petition.
Okay,
And the certifications after all of the signatures are collected.
okay. So again, I didn't do that math following along with you. So it is possible to be on a May ballot.
It sounds like only if council.
Yeah, so if
moves
they,
it forward.
right,
School board's voting in May, right? So that's gonna happen anyway.
so if you, so a series of things would have to happen, including the council deciding to allow it to happen and calling the May 16th, the special election to allow it to be placed early. Otherwise, it would get placed on the November if they collected the same.
There's not already a May election for the school board?
But there's your code doesn't allow, if they collect, the referred ordinance would typically, under normal circumstance, not get placed on a ballot unless it's 90 days out. So that they would have to have the signatures collected by February 15th. So that's not possible. That's not to get the 90 days out. What she's saying is you could choose by saying, well, we'll opt for the 66 days and say it's a special election. If they collect the signatures within that period of time, that is an option, but it would take a council action to do that. Otherwise, it would go on the November ballot. And during that time, the ordinance would be held in abeyance.
Well, I suspect from what I'm hearing, that's likely that this council will pass this. That's what I'm hearing and counting noses right now. I hope for the sake of seeing any homes built in our community this summer, that we will allow for a vote one way or another once petitions are gathered. It will be really sad if we don't, but we have time, I suppose, to look at that in future council meetings from here in the next few weeks. But this turn of events is really unfortunate. I'm not sure how to vote on Alan's amendment now as a result of what this does. The longer we wait, the less likelihood that it comes back as a possibility for the people to vote until November. So I suppose in that case, I'm less likely to vote for Alan's amendment. Thank you.
Randy.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to bring up a similar point to what Councilor Clark just said. I do appreciate, Alan, you bringing up pathway for us. I think there's a lot of good rationale for moving in that direction, considering that the initial vote went down. But I feel like we're already trying to pull this thing together on the fly with some knee-jerk reactions. And I think the public's already confused enough about what it is we're doing or not doing or trying to do. And I think the more clarity we can provide at this point and the more streamlined we can be is better for the process and better for moving forward. So based on that, not that I disagree with what you're doing, but for the reasons I just stated, I will be voting no on that.
Okay. Do we have a motion seconded on the table?
It's a motion to amend.
And it just says to a date as soon as possible,
That date would probably be February 27th.
February 27th.
The soonest date we have is February 13th, but I don't think Councilor Zink is here, so I was just picking one.
You want to speak to that?
The motion would be to postpone it to the 27th.
The 27th.
I don't understand what we would gain by postponing. We've talked about this for a really long time, in depth. And I don't know what we would add in another few weeks. So I think we should get on with it. Thank you.
Any other comments about, you want to speak to what you think would be gained by a couple
Well,
of
I think
weeks?
what we gained by it, and I heard you say this, Emily, is that you don't like surprise motions either. So this wasn't on the agenda. It wasn't what people came here to vote on. It was something very different, which is to put it on the ballot. So, and so waiting 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks isn't a big ask, but it would allow people to think about it some more and be more thoughtful about moving forward, as opposed to you were writing the motion as this afternoon. That's, I don't think, the best way to run a railroad.
Okay, motions on the table. All in favor of the motion all in favor of the amendment to the motion.
It's a motion to postpone and for a date certain. And
It's a motion to postpone to a date certain. All in favor of the motion to postpone to a date certain, please raise your hands. All opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, Greg, I didn't see. Did you favor that?
He was in favor.
You were a yes. Okay, so two in favor.
Muted, Greg.
2 in favor, 6 opposed. Okay, so that goes down. So we're back to the original motion. Do you want to speak?
Yeah. So I don't really like surprise motions. I think it's an unfortunate way to do things. I think it's an unfortunate way to make this happen. And the way that we're doing the strategy, if you call it that, piecemeal, has created this divisiveness and created this misinterpretation and misinformation. And people are very confused about this. I hope this doesn't blow up in our face, but I have a sneaky suspicion it probably will, and set us backwards instead of forwards. But I said I would support this in the past when it came up. I think it's a mistake moving forward like this, but I'll stick to my word and I'll support this motion to move the ordinance forward because I said I would.
Okay, yes, Mike.
I understand why people are voting for this, and I too prefer the opportunity of us moving forward with a more balanced plan that includes, as Alan did tonight and as Greg has done in the past, incentives and more ways that people can buy into the idea if they don't agree. And I think that builds a community with a similar direction rather than creating considerably more division in our community. And that's exactly what this does. It will make it 10 times harder to move forward on any of the other steps we're talking about. So I absolutely think this is the wrong idea at this time. In a surprising, I'll be voting no.
Okay, motion is on the table. All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, and that passes. Thank you. This is painful. I recognize that. I do think it's an important step. I understand that there is a lot of distress in the community, but I will remind you that there are a lot of people who have been testifying to us for several years asking us to take this action. So there will also be some joy in the community tonight as well. And there's much work ahead of us on the other steps. So thank you all for your hard work and for your deliberation. And with that, we are adjourned.